I never imagined that a normal Tuesday evening would change the way I looked at trust, family, and myself. At that time, my life in Cedar Falls, Iowa, was simple and predictable. I worked as a customer support supervisor at a local insurance company, lived in a modest apartment, and followed the same routine every day. Wake up early, grab coffee from the corner cafe, work long hours, come home tired, and repeat. Nothing dramatic, nothing extraordinary. My name is Danielle Parker, and I was 37 years old then. I had been married to Emily Parker for nearly 10 years. Emily was a kind-hearted elementary school teacher, loved by her students and respected by her colleagues. From the outside, we looked like the perfect couple: stable jobs, a peaceful home, and polite smiles at neighborhood gatherings. But like many marriages, there were quiet spaces between us that no one else noticed. Emily and I had been drifting apart slowly, not because of anger or betrayal, but because of silence. Conversations became shorter. Dinners were quieter. We still cared about each other, but life's pressures had pushed us into separate emotional corners. I often told myself that this was normal, that all long marriages went through this phase. One evening, my manager asked me to stay late to help finalize a report. I texted Emily to let her know I would be home later than usual. She replied with a simple, "Okay, drive safe." Nothing unusual. When I finally left the office, it was already dark. The streets were calm, and a light drizzle blurred the city lights. As I drove home, I thought about how exhausted I felt, not just physically, but emotionally. I missed the early days of our marriage when Emily and I would talk for hours about everything and nothing. I reached our apartment building around 9:30 p.m. The parking lot was almost empty. I noticed the lights in our living room were on, which was normal, but something else caught my attention. Our bedroom light was also on. Emily usually turned it off if she was in the living room. I shrugged it off and walked upstairs. I unlocked the door quietly, not wanting to disturb her. As I stepped inside, the apartment felt unusually quiet. The television was off, and there was no sound from the kitchen. I called out softly, "Emily." There was no response. I placed my keys on the table and walked toward the bedroom. I don't know why my heart started beating faster. Maybe it was instinct, or maybe it was just exhaustion playing tricks on my mind. I opened the bedroom door, and that was the moment everything changed. Inside the room, I saw Emily sitting on the edge of the bed, holding a thick envelope in her hands. Her eyes were red, and tears streamed down her face. Papers were spread across the bed, and her shoulders trembled as she cried silently. I froze. This was not what I expected. My mind had raced through 100 terrible possibilities on my way down the hallway, but this scene stopped all of them instantly. "Emily," I said gently, stepping inside. "What happened?" She looked up at me, startled, as if she hadn't heard me come in. For a moment, she tried to wipe her tears and force a smile, but it failed. "I didn't expect you so early," she said softly. "I told you I'd be late, but not this late," I replied, sitting beside her. "What's wrong?" She hesitated, then handed me the envelope. My hands shook slightly as I opened it. Inside were medical reports, test results, and a letter from a hospital in Des Moines. As I read through the documents, my chest tightened. Emily had been going through medical tests for weeks, tests she had never told me about. The diagnosis was serious, not immediately life-threatening, but it required long-term treatment, emotional strength, and support. I looked at her, my voice barely steady. "Why didn't you tell me?" She broke down completely then, covering her face with her hands. "I didn't want to worry you," she sobbed. "You already work so hard. You always look so tired. I thought I could handle it myself." Her words hit me harder than the diagnosis itself. I realized in that moment how far apart we had grown, not in love, but in communication. She thought she had to face this alone. I thought everything was fine because we never talked about the deeper things anymore. I wrapped my arms around her, holding her as she cried. "You never have to face anything alone," I said firmly. "We're married. This is my fight too." That night, we talked for hours. Not about schedules or bills, but about fears, regrets, and unspoken emotions. Emily told me how scared she had been sitting in waiting rooms alone. I told her how empty I had felt coming home to silence every day. Over the next few weeks, our lives changed completely. I adjusted my work hours so I could accompany her to appointments. We cooked meals together again. We took evening walks around Overman Park, talking like we used to years ago. The surprise I saw that night in the room wasn't something shocking in a dramatic way. It wasn't a scandal or betrayal. It was something deeper, a painful truth hidden behind quiet smiles. Months later, Emily's treatment was going well. There were difficult days, but there was also hope. More importantly, there was honesty. One evening, as we sat on the couch watching the sunset through the window, Emily held my hand and said, "I'm glad you came home late that day." I smiled softly. So am I. Sometimes, life doesn't wake us up with loud noises or dramatic events. Sometimes, it's a quiet room, a tearful face, and a moment that forces us to truly see the people we love. And that night, when I entered the room and saw that scene, it didn't break my life, it rebuilt it.